History is where you find it. And surprising Marana, you'll find it everywhere. And even though Marana as a town is new,
it's less than 40 years old. There has been human activity in this area that's 120 square miles that is now Marana that go back 4,000 years to about 2000 BC.
just drive down Silver Bell Road. 4,000 years ago, it was a trail used by early Native Americans. Much later, a wagon trail. And much later still, a paved highway.
We're standing now in front of a lime kiln, which is right across Silver Bell Road from us. This kiln technology was used way back in Spanish colonial times. But with the arrival of Americans in the 1860s and 70s, there was a tremendous mushrooming of homes in the Tucson area and a need for shelter. And at that time, their technology for building homes was basically adobe brick. And adobe, when it gets wet during the monsoons, melts. And so unless you coat the outside of the buildings with some kind of cement, some kind of protection, you're going to have problems. So there was a tremendous demand all of a sudden in the 1860s and 70s for lime. They would know when the limestone was ready and it had transformed into lime when it kind of turned a yellowish color. Then they would take it out, reduce it to a powder form, and then sell it in that form.
Traveling a little farther north on Silver Bell Road, you come across a road most people pronounce as Ina. And Ina Road was named in honor of a remarkable woman named
Ina Giddings. I just learned last week from a woman whose grandfather was the head of the Department of English at the University of Arizona. At the same time, Ina Giddings was the head of the Department of Physical Education, that Ina Giddings probably had nothing in the world that rankled her or upset her more than people calling her Ina instead of her correctly pronounced name, Ina. And here we are, 50 years after her death, honoring her by mispronouncing her name. She homesteaded on a piece of land along what is now Ina Road. In 1932, she was invited by the University of Arizona to become the first head of the women's sports program and the physical education program for women. She continued with the University of Arizona, heading up the women's sports program until the 1950s. And late in the 1950s, Ina Road was named in her honor.
There's few things in this life faster than a bat out of hell. But there's nothing faster than Mexican free-tailed bats if we're standing right by the Santa Cruz River flowing underneath Ina Road.
As we look up towards the bridge, especially those two spans to the right, during the period of about middle of March to the middle of October, would reside about 30,000 bats. And these bats hang under the spans of this bridge during the day, during the light hours, and they take off as soon as the dark starts, and they stay out until the break of dawn when they come back. This is a spectacular sight to see, because as they come out, they look like clouds of black that are coming out. There's so many of them.
If you look to the west from almost any point in Marana, you'll see a peak that looks like a big sombrero. It's got two popular names. The first is Sombrero Peak, because it does look very much like a Mexican sombrero. And the second name is
Safford Peak, named after a Governor Safford, who was governor during the territorial times back in the 1870s. And Safford is remembered for starting the public school system in Arizona. He was loved in memory, but he was very much resented during his own time, because to support those public schools he had to raise taxes, and that was the first time that taxes were raised in Arizona. And then, as now, raising taxes is not a popular thing to do.
Some folks call them the Ancient Ones, and when 1,000 years ago, the Hohokam lived all along the Santa Cruz River. If you continue north along Silver Bell, you'll come to an old Hohokam village, complete with a ball court and mortar pits dug into stone for grinding corn.
It's called Los Morteros. And this was a very densely populated Indian village from about 600 AD up until about 1400 AD. And on this site, you'll find bedrock mortars, you'll find a ball court. And an unexperienced eye would say we're just standing in just desert. But in fact, where we're standing is one extreme end of a ball court. And if you would be standing over there 80 meters away, somebody else would be standing over there 80 meters away, about 80 yards away, looking at us, he would be standing at the other end of the ball court. It's the biggest ball court, Hohokam ball court in the Tucson Basin.
Standing there at Los Morteros and looking to the west, you'll see what seems to be a couple of caves. Well, there was a miner who was convinced those caves contained gold. Well, this feller was fond of two things that don't mix too well: booze and dynamite. And if you think that's a recipe for getting blowed up real good, you'd be right. In the 1910s and early 1920s,
there was a old miner, bachelor miner, who lived by himself in a shack out here about where the tailings are, and he was convinced that there was gold inside of that rock, and he would take dynamite and blast the cave a little bit deeper and bring out the blasted rock and check it out to see if there was gold. After several years of blasting and living by himself, one day his shack and he blew up. There was a dynamite explosion in his shack and he died. There's no reason to believe that this isn't a suicide, but there's also no reason to believe that he just in a drunken stupor made a mistake.
Time was when dude ranching was all the rage here in the Great Southwest for visitors from everywhere. And as we go over the hill from Los Morteros, we come to the world-famous White Stallion Ranch. This is only one of two active commercial dude ranches
in the Tucson Basin that still function. Back in 1940, there were over 100 such ranches in the Tucson area. And in fact, in 1940, this ranch started as a dude ranch before it had been an operating cattle ranch. They accommodate about 100 guests at any one time. And since the beginning, they have had a high number of Europeans. Currently, there are 35% of the guests that are Europeans. Each week, when they have guests from out of the United States, they fly the flag of the country where the guests are from. You can see this week they're from Sweden, Britain, and Belgium. There are lots and lots of activities, lots of things to do. People in the Tucson area can come here for lunch or dinner if you call ahead of time, and there's a $15 fixed price for lunch, a $20 fixed price for dinner. And you can also come anytime to use the gift shop.
Remember all those lime kilns? Well, the limestone had to come from somewhere. As it turns out, there were twin peaks on the west side of the Tucson Mountains. Now, there's only one left. Turns out the missing one was solid limestone. So now we're standing
along a conveyor belt that takes limestone rock from the Twin Peak limestone mine, all the way to the Arizona Portland Cement Company behind me. The Arizona Portland Cement Company started in 1947, and they located here because of one of the peaks of Twin Peaks, which used to be called La Calera, Picacho de la Calera, which was a very high grade limestone hill. That hill, in the meantime, since 1947, has been mined down almost to the surface, leaving another hill beside it, which is the other twin, not containing any limestone. but today the Twin Peaks are actually represented by only one peak that's visual. This conveyor belt was put in by the Portland Cement Company in 1972 and carries rock, limestone rock from the Picacho de la Calera to the factory, and that distance is about 3 miles. And in 1972, this was the longest conveyor belt of its kind in the world.
Not all history goes back hundreds of years. It's not always happy history. Take, for example, the Marine Monument at the Marana Regional Airport.
We are at the north end of Sandaria Road, where it makes a T with Havre Valley Road. And behind me is the memorial for 19 U.S. Marines who died here in a tragic accident on the 8th of April, the year 2000, in an Osprey accident, killing all 19 Marines, which included 3 officers, among which there was a colonel, lieutenant colonel, and a major.
One of the 5 C's that make up Arizona's economy is cotton, and Marana is one of the epicenters of cotton farming in our state. In fact, cotton farming came into the Marana area
during World War I, and has been the cotton has been produced continuously since World War I until now. It's about 100 years of tradition of cotton growth. During World War II, there was still an awful lot of hand labor involved with the production of cotton, and so they had to bring in hand labor wherever they could get it. And during World War II, they would bring in POW German prisoners, and they would keep them in a side camp here in Marana, and these men would work hoeing out weeds and harvesting cotton here in Marana.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our short tour of Marana's past. But there's 120 square miles of historical surprises here, and you'll find a whole bunch more at the Marana Heritage Conservancy, located at the Town of Marana Municipal Complex.